Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is the best way for you to sell highly appreciated commercial real estate, multifamily properties, cryptocurrency, all without having to use a 1031 exchange. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I am joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and wealth minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He is with EM Capital, and he is focused on all things multifamily. And he's the managing member of EM Capital and has over 16 years of experience in multifamily real estate investing. He is focused on acquiring commercial multifamily apartment complexes in markets across the country that exhibit positive growth trends. He is passionate about the role that well-managed, well-maintained economic housing can play in helping to alleviate the current housing crisis for middle and low-income families. Please welcome to the show with me, Chris Lento. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Good, great. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on the show. For our listeners get to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Sure. So I've been doing multifamily investing for the past 16 years. I started doing small 3-family housing in the Boston area while I still had a full-time job, and then grew that into a full-time career. So I do full-time investing in multifamily or apartment buildings, which is what most people call them. So what I do is I kind of have a 2-track investment philosophy right now. So what I constantly sort of sell my properties and 1031 exchange them into larger properties. And those are properties that I personally own, and then get the cash flow from and proceeds from it at the sale. And then in parallel, I acquire larger properties, say 100+ unit properties, mainly in the southeastern US. So North and South Carolina, Northern Florida. I have some properties in Kentucky. And I partner with investors to buy those properties. So I do what's called a real estate syndication, which means that there's a number of passive investors, usually with a $50,000 minimum, who contribute to the down payment of the property and the capital expenses needed to renovate the property. And then we partner together. I'm the managing member. They're the limited partners. Buy the property, do renovations, upgrades, increase rents, and then usually sell it between 3 to 7 years, depending on market conditions.
Excellent.
For a return for the investors.
Fantastic. And we'll dive into that and what you're seeing in today's multifamily marketplace right now. By the way, you can learn more about Chris Lento at emcapitalgroup.com. That's emcapitalgroup.com. But before we dive into the multifamily world and what's going on, I want to take us back, perhaps to an earlier days. I want to help me and the listeners get to know you a little bit more. I believe, Chris, we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing to others. Some people call them superpowers. Some people call them strengths. So maybe it's the high school days, college days. I'm curious, what is the maybe 1 or 2 gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
I think 2 things that I'm particularly good at are figuring out how things work and having a curiosity to figure out how things work. So kind of in a real estate context, how I got into real estate in the first place was out of college. I'm living in an apartment building or small apartment building in Boston. And I'm kind of looking around saying, like, who owns this thing? Me and 3 of my friends live here. We all pay $500 each. That's $2,000 a month. And there's 3 apartments. Like, how does this work? And I just sort of like figured it out, like went to the library actually at the time, pre-Amazon, got some books out, and just figured it out. And I guess another thing that I think is one of my skills is I'm good at bridging people of different disciplines. So I have a talent for kind of understanding enough about many areas that I can bridge kind of communication gaps between them and help bring people together. And that's been valuable in my kind of pre-real estate career and now. So I'm not really an expert at much, but I can kind of bridge a lot of gaps.
Excellent. I love those 2 gifts. It's really unique. Curiosity to figure out how things work, right? And then going and doing those things, right? And then the second discipline of bridging multiple disciplines and communication and kind of kind of clean, getting all of the, I guess, the wires to align. Is that a fair summary?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, then let's dive right into the multifamily world, and we'll try to apply some of those things with the ways that maybe you see or find deals. So, what's the number one secret in today's marketplace to find deals that actually make sense, right? When it comes to value add, forced appreciation, multifamily properties, where are you finding them? How are you finding them? And maybe you can give us a live deal that you recently closed that you're closing now.
Sure. So I mean, so right now, multifamily is extremely popular. Demand is high all across the country, and for the type of deals that I'm looking for, which are really, I'll say $3 to $25 million properties, it's all about brokers. It's brokers, broker relationships, knowing brokers at a personal level, communicating with them often, being clear with them on what you're looking for, why you're looking for it, what your plan is, and then having them trust you and believe that you can close. So certainty of close is huge. It's not always the highest price that gets the contract signed. It's the best value, which is a combination of price and certainty of close and terms of the contract, as far as how much money you're putting hard when. So all those factors. But I know there are some people out there, cold calling sellers or potential sellers, but that's a tough road. And I've never had success at it personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do what's working, right? Do what works to your strengths and what's worked so far. You had something else to add to that?
Yeah. And you asked for an example. So there's a broker that I sold a property through in Boston about probably 4 years ago. And I'm not really looking to acquire in Boston on a primary. I mean, I would for a good deal, but I still keep in touch with them, and we're friends, and we sort of talk maybe every 2 weeks or once a month about the market, about interest rates, just about how his property is doing, about our kids. And he heard that I was selling one of my properties in Boston and looking in North Carolina. And he had a business contact who was selling something in North Carolina. He acted as the intermediary. I got an offer in before it went to market, and kind of putting everything together now, and we're closing in 30 days. So I would never have got that property if I waited for it to go to market and just was one of who knows, a half a dozen people that were offering asking price, which is what I did. I offered, asking price, and it was the relationship. I mean, 100%.
Hands down, that makes perfect sense. And by the way, I would also kind of connect the dots here with a statement that goes like this. We're actually not in the business of buying real estate or selling real estate or selling a tax deferral strategy. We're actually in the business of solving problems, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So if you apply that at the heart of it, right? At the heart of it, the outcome are those things, right? But at the heart of it is solving problems. And if you apply that to the way, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if I'm thinking correctly with what you were saying, your primary way of buying and finding deals is through relationships, and also through commercial real estate world. What's the number one problem for the commercial real estate brokerage world, or the broker who has the deal? Well, it's certainty of the buyer performing, right? Now,
Absolutely.
the second one might be the lender actually lending, right? Because those are the two most important people in the
those
deal.
are tied together, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Certainty of the buyer performing is really wrapped right up in his lender relationships, or their lender relationships, his or her lender relationships. So yeah, that broker is going to sell the property. He's not worried about it selling. He's worried about it selling to someone who can close, and not having to resell it in 60 days when the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly. And then you lose the momentum. You lose out on the multiple offers. You lose out on whatever, achieving that price. The market falls apart. Interest rates go up.
You might lose out on the sale, right? His seller may say, "Hey, I trust you to vet the buyers, and now I'm going to go to a different sales broker."
Exactly. So yeah, their number one problem, it would be certainty of buyer performance and execution. So excellent. All right. So that's the first thing. So, and you found it in 30 days. Amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about the intrinsics of that part? Is it a B, A, C? Is it,
Sure.
What's kind of the specs on the deal?
Yeah. It's a 30 unit B built in the late 80s. the current seller's done a really good job on the CapEx. So they've redone all the exterior, redone the windows, redone the roof. It may need a little parking lot work, but it's really does not have much CapEx or deferred maintenance. So this is really just touch up a couple of the units and bring the rents to market. The rents are far below market. Improve the marketing on it and just hold it for cash flow. And then we'll probably either refinance it or sell it in 5 years. So I'm actually doing a 1031 on another property with a partner in a tenant in common agreement. So we'll probably refi it and buy one or the other out at that point or sell it.
Awesome. We'll get to that in here in a minute. I'm curious, what was the seller's motivation to sell those 30 units in North Carolina?
They are a medium to large, I guess, real estate firm up here in Boston, and they have a Charlotte branch. And from what I can figure out, the head of the Charlotte branch is retiring or moving on to a new career. So they're just sort of trying to unwind their positions in that market. And they've owned it for 3 years. And I think they've done a ton of work and got it from kind of a rough property to a nice property. So they're ready to exit.
So was it a partnership deal or was it just a regular deal?
I think it was a partnership deal. I don't have total insight into it, but it's a real estate company that owns probably 100 properties.
Sophisticated, smart group in there. It is maybe a smaller one, and hey, they had taken good care of it. They hadn't let it just go, and they got a fair price and a fair deal. Excellent. Hey, I love that. And now let's shift into the 1031 into a TIC. So tell us about that deal and what the strategy is there.
So I'm selling. So I have a 3-family building in Boston that I've owned for a long time. I converted it to condos, and I'm 1031ing kind of all of the condos into this larger property. I was planning to do it just myself, and then so it would have been like we'll say a 2.2 to say $3 million property that would work for. And then this property came along. It's a little more expensive than that. So I had to bring a partner in. And then in order to kind of execute the 1031 exchange, we formed a tenant in common. And my partner is actually selling something that he's 1031 exchanging. So we're both 1031 exchanging different properties into this larger property as tenants in common. So we're setting up a tenant in common agreement. There's some slight complications with the lender on that. They don't, I wouldn't say they don't love a tenant in common, but there's more guidelines. They get a little leery that both sides of the tenant in common have to be able to qualify for the loan. Got it.
Right. I want to make sure it all checks out. By the way, what is the biggest frustration with the 1031 exchange that you found in your career?
I mean, the timing, how to line all those things up so that they happen on time and maintain all your relationships, right? So you can kind of line them up with contracts and whatnot, and you could back out if it didn't work, but no one wants to work with you if you're backing out of things at day 60 because your other thing didn't close on time. So just sort of like when to start looking for the replacement property, so you don't want to find your replacement property before your other property sells, because then you're kind of dragging the seller, your new seller out. But if you wait till after, you're kind of under the gun and you could possibly buy a bad deal just because you're feeling a lot of pressure. So it's kind of I guess having enough deal flow that you're confident that you can find a replacement property in time. And then, maybe you're willing, if you're just solo, sometimes you're willing to take a lower rate of return for that tax savings than you would if you had investors.
Yeah. No, could agree with you more. And it's in California and even in Boston where you're at, like Massachusetts, it's just really tough to find deals that make sense, right? So it's nice to have friends and lots of relationships and lots of deals, lots of deal flow to try to fit sometimes that square peg into that circle hole. We call that the shotgun wedding. Sometimes it feels like, right? You got 45 days to get engaged, right? And you got 180 days to get married. And you're like, well, man, I hope this marriage works out. And I hope it's worth it, right? And so we do offer an alternative, which is just kind of cool. When I was at Marcus Millichap, we saw so many people get hurt, right? Because in 05, 06, 07, they had overpaid. They take on too much debt. They had overpaid for the property, let the tax tail wag the investment dog, and they found themselves picking up the pieces when the marketplace stopped,
Right.
and the banks came knocking, right? And it was tough. Some lost half. I had one guy we went with. I remember meeting with him in 2006, and my mentor and I told him to sell everything because we felt like now is the perfect time to sell because he had a lot of debt as well, over leveraged. And he said, "No, this market's going to run." It was about somewhere around 18 to 22 million worth of real estate that he lost within the next 3 years, all of it, zero. And the problem was he had too much debt, right? Not enough liquidity, not enough diversification. And what he had done is just done the 1031 game, right? And he got caught when the music stopped. So
Yep.
we use a thing called a deferred sales trust. It's not a Delaware statutory trust. It's not a TIC. It's not a 1031, but it's an alternative. And what's cool about it, and I'm curious what you think about it, you can park on the sidelines. You can sell high, pay off your debt. So now you're debt free. You could put the funds in hard money lending, stock market. You can put it in passive or active real estate deals with yourself or partners, but you can diversify, right? And not have to be in debt. And once we figured that out, we're going, why isn't everyone doing it? I'm just curious. Have you ever heard of this before?
I have heard of it. And then when I tried to like dig into it more, I ended up going down the Delaware statutory trust kind of rabbit hole. And that seemed good at the beginning. And then it just didn't seem like something that was going to work for my situation. And I never got back to it. So I don't really know a whole lot about it. I think I heard it on a podcast, right? I was driving and I'm like, oh, how do I, I don't have a pencil with me, and then never got back to it. But
Yep.
It almost sounds too good to be true, to be honest. So I'm curious to know what the catch is.
Yeah, so that is our biggest thing there, right? And at Marcus and Millichap, we're sitting in the office, and this is 2009, and literally we're like, we're trying to figure out ways to get business because the marketplace fell off a cliff, and figure out ways to solve challenges for the clients. And my manager brings in who's now my business partner to speak on this deferred sales trust, and he starts telling us like this could solve all the things that your clients are going through right now. We're like, great, wish you would have told us 2 or 3 years ago, right? But he was still kind of really getting it ramped up. And but like most people, I mean, for me, I was going like, you know what do I have to lose? I'll see if this works for the clients. I'll see what they think. I kind of took surveys. Right. I would call people and tell them about it. Let me talk to my CPA. I'll get back to me, when a couple of years my values are back up. But as I kept talking and kept solving the problems and actually doing the deals and actually closing the deals, and that's just really where it changes, then it demystifies the whole thing. Right. And so I think we've closed 7 deals in the past 40 days alone. We've saved 3 failed 1031 exchanges. And one was a $5 million property in Colorado for a multifamily owner, right, who had zero basis and was just ready to sell. And they wouldn't have sold if it wasn't for the deferred sales trust. Another one was a primary home in California, $8.3 million deal. Another one was in Alabama for 2.6. So as we did the deals, it became very clear that, this thing is possible. You can actually do this. So I would just say that's the biggest thing. And like they go on the internet and they read something and they're like, wow, that sounds crazy, too good to be true. Let me dismiss that until they meet somebody and then say, okay, they've done it. They're doing it. They can lay it all out for me. Now they have that coach or that mentor, right, to help you do it. Like the first time you probably did a 1031, you probably didn't know what you're doing, right? Or the first time you bought your first syndication, you had to have that person guide you.
You got to figure it out. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, there's the thousands of closes, billions under management, 25-year track record. And we're closing like at least, it seems like a deal a week now these days. But you can learn more about that at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, everybody. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Next question, Chris, is this. So you're working with brokers, you're finding some deals. North Carolina, I do like North Carolina. South Carolina, I like Alabama. I like Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Arizona. Those are some of my favorite spots. Atlanta, Georgia. But what other places are you kind of focused on? Are you seeing as kind of emerging good opportunities?
So yeah, you hit a lot of them. I just actually recently bought a place in South Carolina as well, in Columbia, and I have a place in Northern Florida and outside of Atlanta. So I generally like the Southeast. I haven't ventured below kind of Northern Florida. So I like Jacksonville. I like Tallahassee. Tons of people have interest in, great markets in Orlando and Tampa. I just haven't kind of gone below Northern Florida yet. It just I don't know why, but yes, Southeast really. The major players in the Southeast. I also haven't jumped into Texas. It seems like Texas is, its own place. Tons of inventory there and a lot of players. And I'm trying to stay in the East Coast time zone if I can, just for family reasons.
Sure.
If I can get down and back in one day, that's great. Time zones kind of screw that up. Let me think. Yeah, I mean, you hit them. I really like the Charlotte-Raleigh area right now. It's a little bit, the cap rates are a little bit lower. I think you got to hunt a little bit more for a deal, but they're a little bit, at least Raleigh's a little bit of a smaller market. So I think the broker relationships can kind of still find some good properties.
Awesome. Yeah, very well said. Thanks for sharing. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Knowing what you know now, Chris, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one gold nugget you would make sure to tell yourself to do?
Take more risks, and don't worry too much about your long-term career path because it'll probably change.
Well said. What's the one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
Who Not How. It's a book about figuring out what you like to do and then recognizing that the things you don't like to do, other people do. So find those people and work with them so everyone's doing what they want to do. That's
so well said. It's like a Dr. Seuss book. Hire the who, don't be the how, right?
Exactly. So when you have a problem, don't think, how do I do this? Think, who should do this?
Who should do this? Exactly. Beautiful. Would you please give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business?
Like a piece of technology kind of thing, or?
Sure.
I really like Asana, I guess, for task management. To-do list kind of thing. I think Asana is a good product.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. Favorite leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Some sort of riff on like practice what you preach or lead from behind kind of thing.
Beautiful. What are you curious about most right now?
Curious about most? That's a good question. I guess what's going to happen with the economy in the next kind of 5 years. I mean, there's a lot of in kind of our societal changes that are going on. Like, how is a lot of these things that are up in the air going to shake out? So
yeah, one comes to mind too is the Biden's proposal to limit the 1031 exchange or eliminate the stepped up basis, and the other one that's kind of crazy is the going from 20 to about 40% on the federal capital gains tax rate. So lots of potential real big game changers for commercial real estate or early wealth in general.
Yeah.
Have any of those caught your eye, or any comments on that?
I think there's too much. There's too many people in Congress and in positions of power that own real estate that there's no way that the capital gains is going to go to 40. It just won't happen. It's just too many people looking at their bank accounts saying, but I think like some sort of wealth tax is possibly the way to go. I mean, people think it's crazy, but we pay real estate taxes, right? And it's not like how much you get as income. It's just this thing you own costs this much. So you pay a percentage of it every year. And, I think with the right structure and the right limits, some sort of wealth tax could solve some problems.
Thanks for sharing.
I think it's gonna take longer for people to kind of wrap their head around it than it.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. It's the 27 trillion. And you're like, but where are we going to be at another? You're like, it's like we're gonna be at 30 trillion, and then at a certain point, you're like, where's this money coming from? But yeah, it's definitely. Let's say we've had. Our leadership has failed us in a lot of ways. But last question, how do you stay centered in your values after all your success, helping a lot of people build wealth in commercial real estate, multifamily investing? And how do you stay centered in your values? And then also, how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach for new goals?
Well, I think the staying centered one, at least in multifamily, is I try to constantly think about the fact that all of these apartments are where people live. They're not just like chess pieces or cash machines or whatever kind of analogy people might use, that they're like homes where people live and want good neighbors and want things repaired on time and want to know they're not going to be evicted for no reason. So just sort of visiting the properties and talking to the residents and kind of getting a idea of like, what are their concerns? I think it kind of helps me stay grounded. And then staying motivated. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't really have that too much of a problem staying motivated. I think I'm kind of motivated person, and I like being busy and kind of learning new things and kind of adapting to new challenges. I'd say one kind of book I read a couple of years ago I thought was really interesting. It was Ray Dalio's Principles.
I'm reading that. I love that book.
It's a good book. And I thought the one thing that really stood out that I remember a couple of years later is he talks about kind of building this ability to, whenever you feel discomfort, like that's where you should lean into or point towards, because that's something you're afraid of, which means you don't know about it, which means it's probably the area that you should be going rather than like turning away from, which is your instinct. So if you can almost build the instinct to be like, ooh, that's uncomfortable, let me go check that out, then like that becomes how you operate, and you're constantly kind of doing the most important thing.
Yeah, I've heard it said this way. I love that. And I've heard it said this way: the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of an interesting idea, right? That your body's almost like, or you're being told where you should go. It's just an uncomfortable feeling.
Very, very well said. Well, Chris Lento, I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing wisdom, sharing some inspiration, sharing some knowledge on some multifamily investing. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you remind them one last time where they can find you?
Yeah, it's emcapitalgroup.com. And my email address and phone number are on there. Feel free to send me an email, give me a call. If you want to talk about real estate investing, how to get involved passively or actively in multifamily investments.
Amazing. Chris, thanks for being on the show. And also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust or a 1031 exchange when it makes sense, and you can find a deal, right, is the best way for you to sell highly appreciated assets and defer capital gains tax and grow your wealth. Remember the Deferred Sales Trust. If you want to learn about it, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Works for cryptocurrency, primary homes, businesses, right? The 1031, it only works for investment real estate. So you really want to make sure you understand how this works and how it can help you grow your wealth. Again, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Please rate, review, subscribe, share this with somebody it could help out today. We so appreciate everyone who's listening or watching this.